Hello everyone, this video is going to be about new features of post-processing, which is the masking of effects and also a feature of subtraction between masks. So post-processing is the part of OpenMoBu repository, is the open source set of plugins and scripts for Autodesk Motionbuilder. So here's the final effect that I'm going to show how to make in this video. You can see here there is the sprite on the plane showing the fire flames. And also we see the effect of the distortion in the air, like a heat distortion. And that was made by using the displacement effect in the post-processing. Also interesting thing is we have this pendulum here, and this is the effect of subtraction between two masks when we don't see a distortion effect anymore, when the foreground objects are covered the mask. And in the video, I'm going to show step by step how to make such effect. All right, let's make a new scene. So I'm clear everything what we have here. And let's make some flame first of all. So I'm going to put the plane and add some 90-degree rotation around x-axis. So it will be a front plane in our view. And then we can download the Atlas texture of the flame, animated flame. So I've used the OpenGameArt site, and there are interesting atlases here for the game, but it also could be a good fit for parametric texture object we have in the OpenMoBu. So I already downloaded the flame PNG file, which is the atlas. So let me put into the scene. I'm adding into the scene this, and we see that there is the matrix of 12 by 6 flame frames, animated flame. So what we can do now, we need to go to the shading elements, and we have here parametric blend, which is the layered type of a texture, a special texture in the OpenMoBu. So we drag and drop here on our plane we have in the scene and attach texture to the diffuse channel of material. So what is missing here is that we need to assign our texture or flame atlas texture as a layer of the parametric blend. For doing that, we go to our parametric blend. We don't have any layers at the moment. So we need to drag and drop flame and attach it as a layer. The next step is to define the properties and define how many columns and rows we have here. So there will be 12 by 6. So now we already see that it started looking like one single frame of the animated flame. Let's also add some transparency. For that, we could use a single shader, like a flat shader. We just assign this flat shader, replace, and we also need to add the accurate transparency. So we have single frame. Now let's make it animated. What we need to do here is we need first of all to make these properties animated. So we just press K on them, and we see that we start seeing this flame animation. Then we can tweak the number of frames, for example, 24. So it will be displaying, I think it's a good sense of time here. A good effect we're already seeing. One additional checkbox I would like to put here is the pre-multiply alpha. And I think that's good enough for having our flame effect to continue on the environment. As the environment, I'm going to do quite simple constructions here. So we go to element primitives. We have a wider range of geometry primitives. So we could build some, let's say, ground plane. And I'm going to put this into the center of coordinates and just make it a little bit bigger, scale it up. And then I will going to put some torus. That will be the object in the background, and that could help to clearly see the final post-processing heat distortion effect. Yes, so I put it here, make it bigger. And even for a simple environment, I think it's good enough. So we can get now to the post-processing itself and make some distortion and masking for it. To run the post-processing, we first of all need to create a camera, because the post-processing only works in the camera view. So let's drag and drop camera into the scene, activate the view from the camera, and position it. I'm going to position the similar way how it was in perspective view before. So the next step here is we go to the shading element and we have post-processing object. The same way we drag and drop into the scene, and it should appear under the user object. So we select it, go to the properties, and here we could define a big set of built-in effects here. So let's activate our post-processing and activate displacement. So that's the displacement for the whole image. In our case, we want to load down the displacement and limit it with the area around flames. And the masking is the feature that could help with that. So let's turn off the active for the post-processing and let's create the mask volume. For that, I'm going back to Asset Browser in Elements Primitives and just drag and drop some polysphere into the scene. And with this sphere, I'm going to define the area of my flames distortion. I'm going to stretch it and put it just a little bit above the base of the fire. So the next thing is how we can define which objects go into which mask. So by default, we have the support up to 4 masks textures per one post-processing. And in order to define which object goes into which mask, if you want to do this, you need to go to the shaders. There is a special shader called FX masking, and you need to drag and drop into your object or selected list of objects. The only important thing to know here is that the fixed masking by itself, it will not render your object. So that's why, as usual, we should append. So that means it will be just additional tagging on top of the existing assigned shader. But in our case, we don't want this volume to be rendered at all. So it's only something invisible define the area for the distortion. So that's why we're going to replace. So then there is no render for this sphere, but it's going to be rendered into the mask. So let's check how it's happening right now. I'm going back to post-processing, in properties, activated back, displacement. And if we go under the common section, so we have it here, common setup group, we have use masking on by default, and then there is the enable masking for all effects. Let's activate that. The mask A, so let's check our fixed masking shader. So here are 4 masks that we could define our objects to render into. I'm going to put a checkbox under the mask A so that our model going to be rendered there. And then I'm going to return back to my post-processing and visualize mask. So here our volume is rendered into the mask. So now let's define mask A properties. We want to invert to have effect only inside the mask, so this distortion. The next thing I would like to do is to feather out the borders, because you see now they are very strong, very sharp borders. So let's smooth them out. We have several features how we can do this. First of all, we can blur and also define the bigger scale for that. And another thing we can do here is to use the rim, which is part of backlighting, but here when we have the sphere rounded object, it could help to have this kind of fell off of the mask texture. So we could activate rim and define the fellow effect. So let's render and see how this looks like. So you see we could define how visible our mask is and blur it quite well. So now we have this distortion effect only inside the area of the flame, which is exactly what we want to do. So the next step is to tweak the options of the displacement to make it looks more natural, at least to emulate the heat distortion better. So we go to the displacement setup, and here we also have the properties for use masking and masking channel to mask individually on the displacement. This is the cases when you want to do a color correction for the full image and then do the heat distortion only for this specific area masked by mask A. So this is quite a useful feature. For every effect you have the same thing where you could mask it individually. So let's increase the speed. I think we could increase it quite a lot. And then let's slow down the magnitude maybe. So we have just a slight distortion. Yeah, I think this one looks quite nice. And another effect that I would like to show here is the subtraction between two masks. So why do we need this? It's for cases as our post-processing is just a 2D filter applied on top of the screen image. So that means if we create one more sphere here, I'm going to make it bigger and put in front of our flame. And as it's a foreground object, but the 2D mask distortion distort this object as well. So how we can make effect that our object covering the applied distortion? In order to do this, we could render this subject, foreground object, as the mask B, and then subtract mask A from the mask B. So let's do this. I'm going to add a fixed shading for this element as well. In my case, I'm going to append. It's because the sphere, it's a visual object and masking on the same time. But just take care about the performance, because if you have a complex geometry, and I'm going to render this complex geometry as the visual object and then as the volume for masking, that could be quite expensive, because that's also additional rendering costs. In my case, it's a clearly quite simple element, so I can just append and render it 2 times. One time visually, we see on the screen, another time it will be rendered into the mask. So in the properties, I'm going to render into mask B, so it will be another mask. And then we go back to the post-processing, and let's see what visually we have in mask B. So I'm going to visualize display. This is our mask A, and this is our mask B. So now let's subtract one from another. We go to mask A. So I want to position this sphere on front and visualize. And then we go to mask A properties, and I'm going to use mix and mix it with the mask B. And then we invert. And this is where I'm going to, I just pressed invert for mask B. And we have effect of covering. You see, when I rotate the viewport, I'm just covering my mask A with the sphere of rendered into the mask B. So let's go back to original view. And now if we position our sphere, we don't see any distortion anymore, because this is the foreground object rendered into the mask B. And if we rotate the camera view, we see the distortion effect by this volume of mask A. So that tricks that I was thinking to show in this video. Thank you for watching, hope it will be useful. Bye.